Okay, so in this video, we're going to work on this one here, and then I'll have another exercise for you to do. But we're going to go into the eraser tool now. Okay, so if we come over to the left here, we see there's three different eraser tools, right? We have our eraser tool, background eraser tool, and magic eraser tool. And I'll go through each one of these and I'll kind of cover their strengths and weaknesses. But I think we're already familiar with the eraser tool. But just to clarify, right? So the eraser tool is going to either erase to a transparency or it's going to erase to a background color. Okay, and that just kind of depends on how you have your layer over here. So if I have a background layer that's locked, if I try to erase anything here, it's going to erase to the background color, right? So whatever's selected here. So we see my background color is white, right? But I could change that. Let me go ahead and if I change that to red, and right, so right now red is the foreground, but if I just click the little arrow here, that will flip my red to the background. So if I start erasing here, I'm going to get red, right? And the way that we've been doing things, again, like I said, I like to kind of show you the more technical, difficult ways to do things, but I'm also going to show you some neat tricks here we can use. So in the past, if I wanted you to remove the background, what I had you do was, I'm going to just unlock this, but the way that I typically had you do it is you would, again, like I showed you in the other video, how we were doing things, is you would have perhaps made a selection, right? Right? And then, we could delete that and then put in another layer, and then, we could fill that to, I don't know. Yeah, we'll fill that to red. Oh, sorry. Fill that to red. So that's the way that we would have done things. But again, I think it's beneficial to know how to do these things in many, many different ways with Photoshop. So I'm going to undo all of this. Okay. And I'm going to come back to my eraser tool. Now remember, so since I unlocked that layer, it's no longer a background layer. If I use the eraser tool now, it erases to transparent, right? Not to a color. So if you want to see what it looks like with the color, then what you would have to do here at this point is create a new layer, put that underneath, and then use the paint bucket and then fill that. And then as we come back to the eraser tool, make sure I'm on the right layer. So as we come back to the eraser tool, now it's continuing to erase to that reveal that layer that's underneath. So why are we going over the eraser tool? Well, let's say I wanted to do exactly what I just did. Let's say I wanted to use the eraser tool and I wanted to erase everything except these spice spoons, right? So if I'm just on the eraser tool, I could come in here and I have a hard edge set, but I could come in here and try to manually do this, and right, this is not the best way to do it at all, but that is a way you could do it. And if there's any overlap here, the nice thing about the eraser tool is you can come up to erase to history, and now it's only going to erase whatever previous marks are there from the eraser tool. So here we can see I'm coming in and I can now erase those areas that I had previously erased. But I'm going to just click that off for now. And there's settings up here. The eraser tool, you can have it as a brush, a pencil, or a block, right? So notice it changes based on whatever I change there, but just keep it to brush. And opacity and flow, you should be familiar with these things already. So that's just your basic eraser tool, okay? Now, let's keep that task in mind. Let's say I do want to isolate and bring these things out here, these spoons. Well, this is where, and you guys are going to hate me so much for showing you this now when this could have made your life so much easier in the past, but just think of all the skills you gained with selections, okay? But now let's go to background eraser tool. Now this is a little bit of a kind of a goofy tool, but it can work in certain situations really, really well. And what this does is this will sample an area that Photoshop thinks is the background. So we have these options across the top here. So we have this continuous sampling, we have a one-time sampling, and then you can actually set a background color here. So they all have their differences, but I would say what you would find the most beneficial is this one right here, this one in the middle, sampling once, right? And these terms kind of mean the same things, right? So if you look at the limits, we have contiguous, which we know what that is, right? We know that contiguous means that it's going to search for the colors until it hits a border, right? And then it'll only erase in that area. Discontinuous means that it'll take the entire selection you have and use and delete those colors. And then find edges is Photoshop's way of kind of guessing where it thinks the edge is, and it will delete what you're selecting there. And then tolerance is the range, obviously, for the contiguous. But I'm gonna keep this on discontiguous, and let me show you what this does. So I'm on the sample, right? Sample once, and I'm just gonna click right here on this blue, and I'm gonna hold. So I'm gonna click and hold, so we see, so now it's sampled that blue, right? And now as I'm moving around, and it's only gonna delete this blue, and then when I come to the spoon, watch what happens. It will not select the spoon because it's using the sample that I've picked. Now if I let go, right, now it's reset itself. The first click I do will now be the new sample source. So if I click on the white here, okay, we see that it's erasing, but now if I move into the blue, we see it doesn't do anything, right, because it's used that white as the sample hue, okay? So again, now if I want to keep on right going and deleting this background, I just have to make sure that I'm back on the blue, and while I'm holding down, now I can go through and I can keep on deleting. Now this works great when you have clear-cut backgrounds like this. If there's a nice contrast and not a lot of blurring or gradients or things like that, then this background eraser tool can work really, really well. And it's super clean, right, when you have things like this. So you can make the selection, which works just fine, or you can try something like this, but just remember every time you let go, it's going to select a new sampling point wherever you click, right? And if you didn't want that, the way that you could do this is we could then change to our sampling swatch. So if I click on this, right, it's whatever I designate as the background, it will then keep that locked in. So watch here. If I'm going to sample this background color, but notice it's in the foreground right now. So I'm going to just flip that to the background. Okay, and I'm going to come back to this background eraser tool. So now the sample point is set. So the first click doesn't matter. If I click on this white, nothing happens, right? Because it's not set. The set background is the only thing that will be erased. So if I click out here, right, it erases. And if I come into the white, nothing happens. So those two kind of work, right? One locks it in, and then one will take a new sample every time you click, right? And then you'd have to just use your judgment on contiguous or not. And this one here, the sampling continuous, I don't use this much at all because this is Photoshop guessing. So if I click here, right, and I move around, if I come into the edge here, this is a pretty clear edge, so Photoshop will just probably assume that, okay, that's not background. But okay, do you see where it just popped in there? This is why I don't really, you'd have to play with tolerances and mess around with it, but for the most part, it thinks that's the background, but we can see right here and here, it kind of, right, it's continuously sampling, and it kind of will look at how much of the selection is one color or the next. So right now, right, if we can see the circle, it's predominantly not that white of the spoon, but once I move into this here, it's now going to say, oh, okay, well now maybe the spoon is the background because it's flipping back and forth between what it thinks you're trying to select. So I don't use that one much, right, if at all. So with these tools, okay, we now are going to, let's switch to this image. Now this is, right, this is one of your weekly exercises. And again, in the past, if I wanted you to, for example, cut this woman out with her hair, right, I showed you how to do this with, a color range selection or select and mask, and right, that refine edge brush tool, right? So there's a lot of ways that we've kind of already done this, but now using this background eraser tool and just this eraser tool, or you could use the eraser tool as well, but using the background eraser tool, I want you to basically edit out the entire background, right? And I'll just, as a way to get you started, let me show you how nice this is, right? So all this hair, right? This is all like, if we were trying to make a selection here, I mean, you could do it, and we've already done it with hair, but let me just show you, and again, you guys are gonna hate me for showing you this now, but let me show you. So I'm gonna click on sample once right here. So wherever I click, tolerance I'll put down to 30. And here you see an option, protect foreground color. Now you could do this if let's say for example, her skin tone. Let's say I'm gonna and I'm gonna just sample that skin color. And I could say, if I come back to my background eraser tool, if I have that on, then it's gonna ignore that color. So if I click here, right? So recall, I'm erasing to transparency now here because this is a layer. But just so we can see it, let me put a layer in underneath, and let me fill this. Let's do kind of let's do this color. So, I need to sample her skin color again, okay, and then back to background eraser tool. So if I have protect foreground color on, it's going to ignore, right, any skin color, that tan skin color, and you can play with the tolerance again. But let me just show you here how this works with the hair, right? So we're getting a little bit of that haloing, a little bit of fuzz there, but we could increase our tolerance a bit, right? Do you see how easy and nice this is to just isolate that background color? And then essentially we're erasing, right? And remember, so it's sampling once. So if I let go, I have to make sure I come back and I click on this background color, and then I move in. And it's only going to look for that background color, and I can erase that. And it does a pretty good job. We can see that the hair, right, that hair looks pretty good. But if you were getting, if it looks a little bit off, or if it's not quite right, that's when you would play with your tolerance a little bit here, okay? So with the eraser tool, right, let's see if you can take everything out except the woman, right? Now it's not going to work so great over here, but here you could probably just use the eraser tool and play around with it and manually take some of this stuff out. And remember because I have erase to history. Remember the erase to history thing too. If you do get a little bit of a goof, right? If it's messed up a little bit and you've done something like that, then just come to erase history, and then now it will erase whatever you've done, right? And I have a super hard edge right now, which you may not want that, but I want you to just get some practice. Again, I know you already know how to do this with the other techniques, but as we move into more mark making things and we move away from photographs, just having a wider array at your disposal on how you know how to do things will be really helpful, because we are going to switch gears and go into some more again, like I said, some digital things, some imaginary spaces where you'll actually be using mark making to make images instead of manipulating photographs, okay? So that's your other weekly exercise. Have fun with that, and just use the eraser tool. Oh, the last one here, the magic eraser tool, I would highly suggest not using this one, and I'll show you why. Let me go back to I guess this is okay. Let me show you what this tool does. This tool works just like the magic wand tool, but what it does is it will automatically erase. So if I'm selecting it, and just think of the magic wand, right? All this is doing is if I click, wherever I click, it's going to guess, and it's just going to delete it, right? Now, the reason why I don't think this is such a good tool is because you don't really have a lot of control. It's just going to automatically delete it. But this is the same thing. If I just took the magic wand tool, if I just clicked somewhere and made a selection, then I could just hit delete, right? That's doing the exact same thing that this magic eraser tool does. So it would be more beneficial to use the magic wand tool, because then you could see what your selection is, and then you could choose, okay, now let me delete it. Whereas if I just use the magic eraser tool, right, if I just click here, it just deletes, and there's no, right, I couldn't check or double check or do anything like that. So use that at your own risk, and these settings are exactly the same as the magic wand tool. So but again, I would not recommend using that if you were going to be trying to spot and selectively remove things. Okay, let me know if you have questions, but let's see if you can just use that eraser tool and get her isolated on any background color.